Four candidates are vying to become the next mayor of Syracuse. The front-runners, Democrat Juanita Perez-Williams and Independent Ben Walsh, are in a dead heat to make history tonight.
Republican Laura Levine and Green Party candidate Howie Hawkins are challenging from behind. After months of campaigning and hard work, it all comes down to this. You're watching Talking Points Election Coverage Special Report. Throughout the night, we'll be bringing you the latest on the Syracuse mayoral race. Good evening. I'm Josh Carney.
And I'm Mike Riccardi. We'll also be taking a look at Proposition 1, which appears on all New York State ballots. But we begin tonight with the mayor's race. It's been a pretty interesting journey to where we are today. We have two candidates who rose up out of nowhere to lead the polls. On the Democratic side, Perez-Williams was hardly considered for her party's endorsement, but her grassroots campaign kept her in the race. And as we saw the second leading candidate, Andrew Maxwell, drop out, Perez-Williams took over. She wound up crushing Democratic standard-bearer Joe Nicoletti in the primary and has remained in a fight for the lead ever since.
Independent Ben Walsh had a fair share of struggles getting on the ballot. Walsh tried to get as many party nominations as he could. He was eventually left off the Republican ballot and the Independence Party ballot, giving Laura Levine an unopposed run for both. But Walsh was determined to get on. He started a write-in campaign and beat Levine in the Independent primary. He also joined the Reform Party's ballot. Now, Mike, Levine called Walsh too liberal and Juanita called him too conservative. So where in the polls is that taking place in terms of public opinion? Well,
clearly running as an independent, I think, is helping him receive votes from both the Republicans and registered Democrats in the city. And when we do take a look at the latest poll numbers, as of 5 weeks ago, Juanita Perez-Williams had 35% of the vote and Ben Walsh had 28%, with Levine with 9% and Howie Hawkins with 5%. And now when we look at the latest polls just this week, and these polls, again, were done by Syracuse.com, Siena College, and Spectrum News, we have Perez-Williams dropping down to 34% and Ben Walsh taking the lead at 36%.
It certainly shows a neck-and-neck race.
We know the numbers, but who are both of these candidates and what issues concern them the most? Talking Points contributor Byron Tollefson is here to tell us more.
Juanita Perez-Williams would make history as Syracuse's first Latina mayor. She's a Mexican-American that grew up just south of San Diego. Juanita has campaigned on being an executive manager, someone with over 30 years of government experience. She's a U.S. Navy veteran who moved to the area in 1994 to work for the state education department. After 9 years working at Syracuse University, Mayor Stephanie Minor chose her to lead the city's legal office in 2010. Before the election, she was the regional director for the State Department of Labor. Ben Walsh comes from a family of Republicans. He's the grandson of a Syracuse Republican mayor, but Walsh broke tradition to become a lifelong independent. His message is that he'll rise above party politics and will be able to unite the city. Syracuse.com endorsed Walsh, saying his campaign appeals to all parts of the city. He's led Syracuse's economic development team for 6 years under Stephanie Minor. Proponents say in that role he's revitalized downtown, specifically with his remaking of Hotel Syracuse.
Thanks, Byron. The college Democrats and college Republicans have played a role in this year's election. Talking Points reporter Gabrielle Caracciolo spoke with SU students about their work on different campaigns.
SU college Democrats and Republicans alike are getting involved in the political process by volunteering on mayoral campaigns. Democrat Audrey Miller says she enjoys her volunteer work for the Perez-Williams campaign.
Lately, it's been a lot of phone banking and going door to door, talking to people. The last few days has been a really big push to get out the vote.
Likewise, Republican Emily Green's work for the Levine campaign consists of similar duties.
We would either go door to door, make calls, or just sit in her office, sort through signs. One day we drove around and put signs in like public spaces saying Laura Levine for mayor. Pretty much whatever she needed us to do, we would help out with.
Both political clubs hosted their party's respective candidates as guest speakers at meetings this semester in order to familiarize students with the campaign's main issues and encourage them to get involved.
It was really great. Like, everyone loved it. Like, I've never seen our club that engaged as the day that she came.
She just has this way of speaking to everybody, like the people in a room, and making it feel like she's talking to you.
As for why Syracuse students should care about the mayoral campaign, both girls agree that even if students are not registered to vote here, local politics can still impact their lives.
This is our future. We have the power to change so much.
I care because I live here. I'm here, 9 months out of the year, and so a lot of the things, not the school systems, but safety especially, definitely affects me.
Freen says the clubs are working together to plan a debate to continue to encourage students to engage in politics. Gabrielle Caracciolo, CitrusTV.
Now we go from the city to the state, where Proposition 1 has been hotly contested. Prop 1 calls for a constitutional convention that could either amend or change the New York Constitution entirely. It's been 20 years since the last vote, and groups from around the state have become involved. Here to break down what could happen is Talking Points contributor Dan Prager. Dan, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
So this proposition comes out every 20 years. So why are people making it such a big deal, and why now?
Well, why now? It's the 20-year mark, and why now is because this is an opportunity for change. So a lot of groups that are supporting this see this as an opportunity for change. You're seeing the Bar Association is one of the biggest supporters, and pro-marijuana groups that really think that this constitutional convention could cause the change they need to get their policies enacted.
Now, the Constitutional Convention, by estimates, could cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Syracuse.com endorsed the yes vote, saying that the changes that could come through are worth the money. Maybe they're a little too facetious on whether or not we can trust the political process. But why exactly, Dan, do people oppose Proposition 1?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. The big one, and the reason that a lot of unions oppose it, is because you have this worry that this constitutional convention could take away pensions, could take away retirement funds for unionized workers. People like pro-gun groups worry that it could change gun laws that are on the state. So a lot of people who are worried about their rights being taken away, and a lot of people who are worried about the financial impact, are definitely voting no. And you have a lot more no's than yeses as far as donors go right now.
So if you're looking at no's and yeses, where does the public opinion's concerns sort of lie? And ultimately, do you think that this measure will pass?
Well, right now, public opinion has turned toward no. It's actually really interesting because you saw earlier in the year it was a huge measure toward yes, but in the past month it has taken an absolute dip. Support has gone down about 25% and opposition has taken that up. And that might have something to do with the over $3 million that have been poured into that opposition effort. Support has less than $1 million. You're seeing the donors really going after opposition. So at this point, I think if you follow the money, it's probably not going to pass, but anything can happen. It's an election night, so it remains to be seen.
Well, it's certainly interesting to watch the whole thing play out because, like I said, Syracuse.com endorsed yes, and you have people on both sides endorsing no. You have State Senator DeFrancisco, who's the #2 ranking Republican in the state Senate, and then you also have people, like you said, like teachers, police officers, firemen, who are worried about losing their pension. So, Dan, thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you on later in the show.
We showed you what it's like over the most, but how is Ben Walsh faring over the Marriott? We have Conor Wight downtown at Walsh's watch party with more. Conor, are they excited or nervous?
Guys, the excitement here is palpable. We just had a campaign spokeswoman come out, and she said when the polls were closed, everyone began to cheer raucously. She said now that it's up to God, and just to have fingers crossed, everyone's really excited. We've had music going all night. This building itself actually represents one of Ben Walsh's biggest accomplishments. During his time as the Syracuse Economic Development Director, he actually helped to reinvigorate this hotel, to reinstate it, to get it revamped, something that a lot of people didn't think was possible. You got a lot of people on his side. On the flip side of that, a lot of people look at his time as the Economic Development Director as something to be wary of. They believe that they allege that he may or may not have used tax subsidies to get developers on his side and promote him illegally. Guys?
It's Conor. Coming up, Jack Watson joins us to break down one of the most contested issues during the mayoral debates. Don't go anywhere.
They said a bottle was just a bottle. That no one would ever notice me. But I knew I could be more. That one day, I would make people smile.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
Just over 17,000 residents voted in the last Syracuse mayoral election. Talking Points reporter Byron Tollefson stopped by Huntington Hall today, where SU students could vote in today's election.
This is without a doubt an important election. 1 out of every 2 Syracuse children live in poverty. I just talked to some election administrators who say that as of 1 p.m., only 40 students have come out to vote. Some students like sophomore Kyle Rosenblum say it's because of a disconnect between SU students and the community.
Because we're on this hill and because students don't often go downtown except to go to like possibilities or places in Armory Square, we don't actually get to see what the Syracuse community is like.
It was below 40 degrees outside today, and some students said not voting was just the convenient thing to do. But according to junior Dwayne Elmore, that's not an excuse.
I feel like if you care enough, you'll deal with the cold, or you'll vote in between classes or before or after classes.
Billy McMillan has worked at the Huntington Hall polling location for nearly a decade.
I also work over at the VA, the medical center, and you're going to tell somebody to put his life on the line for this country that voting isn't that important? It's very important. It's one of your God-given rights in this country, and you owe those vets a hell of a lot more than just blowing off an election.
And Ethan Thompson is the project events manager at NYPIRG. Thompson's gone to classes, he's tabled at Shine, and done everything to get students involved in voting. But why is there still such low student turnout?
Convenience. People don't understand how much of an impact that they can have. I know I touched on it, but voting and public participation was not stressed to us as a generation.
The Syracuse Police Department could undergo some major changes under the new mayoral administration. With one of the highest violent crime rates in the country, what will a new administration prioritize in an effort to make the city safer? Talking Points contributor Jack Watson is here to tell us more. Jack, thanks for being here.
Great to be here.
So would an expansion of this magnitude be costly?
Josh, it's no secret that expanding the police force here in Syracuse will be costly, but it's something that the mayoral candidates are really keeping in the back of their heads here. Ben Walsh, this has been one of the major talking points, if you will, of Ben Walsh's campaign. He says in the short term, hiring more cops would be less expensive than buffering the ranks with overtime spending. And it's important to keep in mind that overtime spending cost nearly $13 million last year. That's a major cost. And Laura Levine, the Republican nominee, has said that she would use some of that money to hire more police officers, saying, quote, cheaper isn't always better.
Now, Jack, like you said, Ben Walsh is a big supporter of this expansion. Why is the independent candidate so supportive?
Well, he's so supportive of this mainly because he supports increased diversity in the police force. Listen for yourself to what Ben Walsh has to say about the matter.
Why? By putting more police officers on the streets, I think we'd be in a position to actually do some proactive community-based policing and begin developing relationships in the community. That's what's lacking right now more than anything.
And another thing that's lacking, according to Ben Walsh, is diversity in the police force. Most of the police officers and the SPD do not actually live in Syracuse. They live in the surrounding suburbs, and the vast majority of the officers are white. So he wants to bring more diversity, have more diversity hires, and that, of course, would expand funding.
Those problems are compounded by the assortment of other problems that they have, including harassment suits that Juanita Perez-Williams was involved in during her time at City Hall. So are people expecting her to take a more active role in terms of managing these issues?
That's right. Juanita Perez-Williams, when she was with City Hall, she was a lawyer there, and she took really to the forefront here in 2010. 3 lawsuits cost the department $1.1 million for harassment. She took a step forward saying the quote, the city needs a new hotline for police department employees to call anonymously with complaints of mistreatment. So taking a major step forward in terms of these mistreatment issues for police officers.
Absolutely. One of the key contentions of the race and something that we'll definitely be paying attention to in the months ahead. Thanks, Jack. Syracuse was one of the first cities to declare themselves a sanctuary city. That puts them at odds with President Trump, who has threatened to cut funding for any city that doesn't prosecute immigrants. How would a new mayor address the issue? Talking Points contributor Elijah Shama is here to break it down. Elijah, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So what are the candidates' stances on Syracuse being a sanctuary city?
Well, when we look at the two candidates, you see Juanita Perez-William very much in favor of being a sanctuary city. She says it harkens back to her own experiences with discrimination. She saw her father get harassed by Border Patrol, and she says Syracuse needs to be a city for everyone. When you look at Ben Walsh, it's not that he's kind of anti-immigration, it's just that he says that being a sanctuary city doesn't allow him to kind of activate the change that he feels is necessary. He thinks he can do more without calling the city a sanctuary city, so he opposes the measure. So both of these major candidates are kind of on either side of this issue.
Now, Elijah, the city of Syracuse has a pretty large refugee population. What do you think that means for the next mayor when they have to deal with this issue?
I think it's incredibly important for the next mayor when they come in, because when we think about this refugee population in the metro area is over 10,000 people. That's not a small number of people. Combine that with the fact that these refugees in the metro city area added $1.7 billion, that's billion with a B, to the city's GDP. This is a big chunk of the city. This is 26%. 26.2% of the city's population are refugees. This is going to be something that mayors are going to need to court and try and grow and expand, because it has been and probably will continue to be a source of economic growth for the city.
Now, this issue isn't a clean slate. Mayor Minor already set the agenda of a sanctuary city, coupled with the fact that there is a tremendous refugee population. So what kind of has been the effect of Mayor Minor designating Syracuse as a sanctuary city?
It's really unclear, and it's kind of hard to gauge that effect, especially because when we look at illegal immigration in Syracuse, it's really low. In a survey of 155 metro areas by Pew Research, Syracuse was 154. 0.4% of our population is illegal immigrants. That's about 5,000 people. And while that's not a lot of people, it still is a significant number of people kind of involved, and that's going to be an economic boom whether or not that's making it on tax forms. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what happens. Syracuse hasn't necessarily been negatively penalized for being a sanctuary city yet.
Well, something that's going to come into play with all of this is the role of President Donald Trump and the Department of Justice and their stance on it. But it's certainly going to be an issue that could either be the continuation or the end of the Minor administration's legacy. Elijah, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
After the break, we'll take a live look at Juanita Perez-Williams' watch party, where Talking Points reporter Sabrina Maggiore is standing by. Stay tuned.
This is the story of a boy who didn't talk for a long time. The boy liked things to always be the same. Any changes would scare and upset him. The unknown was an unfriendly place. The boy was very sensitive to lights and sounds. So he built secret hiding places where they couldn't get in. The boy didn't like looking people in the eye. He wasn't trying to be mean, it just made him feel uncomfortable. Sometimes he would flap his arms again and again.
One day I found out I have something called autism. My family got me help. Slowly, I found my voice and learned all the ways I could live with it better.
Early intervention can make a lifetime of difference. Learn the signs at autismspeaks.org.
Your daughter just had her first breakup. Do you A, put yourself in her shoes? B, console her?
Don't worry, sweetie. This is gonna happen a lot.
Or C, find her a new boyfriend?
Nice, single boys. That was weird.
As a parent, there are no perfect answers. But you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same.
One of the major issues in the next mayor's term has been a major issue in the city for the past couple of years: what to do with I-81. I-81's fate will impact Syracuse for decades to come. Two options for the faulty highway remain. Talking Points contributor Gilat Melamed is in studio to explain the future of I-81 under a new mayor. Gilat?
Two options remain for the 1.4-mile stretch of I-81 that runs through the center of Syracuse. The first is a community grid option. This option tears down the current elevated highway and replaces it with a street-level boulevard. Traffic would be redirected and I-481 would become I-81. Second option is called the viaduct alternative. I-81 would be demolished and rebuilt as a new and wider elevated highway. Those in favor of the community grid say it will physically and metaphorically tear down the wall between Syracuse University and the Syracuse West Side. Those in favor of keeping the elevated highway say it will be better for traffic and the local businesses. While this is an important issue, there was not much to debate. Candidates Juanita Perez-Williams, Howie Hawkins, and Ben Walsh all favor the community grid option. Lori Labine wants a combination of the community grid and a tunnel or a depressed highway. For citizens voting with I-81 in mind, the outcome itself is not so much the issue, it's what candidate will be best at achieving that same outcome. I-81 is quickly approaching the end of its usable lifespan, which means a decision must be made soon. And while the Department of Transportation does have the final say on I-81's fate, the people of Syracuse will certainly remember who their mayor was and what their mayor stood for when that decision was made.
Now, Gilat, what role will the next mayor have when it comes to I-81?
Yeah, I mean, the next mayor is going to have an absolutely huge role when it comes to I-81. I mean, depending on what the decision is, Juanita Perez-Williams, Howie Hawkins, and Ben Walsh all said that if it's not the community grid, they will fight against it with the DOT. So fighting back is one huge role they're going to have. Another huge role is that regardless of what happens, some buildings are going to be torn down. Businesses might be torn down. Houses might be torn down, regardless of the option. They might need to implement new policies to reimburse those people. And another thing to think of is that regardless of what option comes out of this, there's going to be economic changes, and they're going to have to oversee these changes. And lastly, it's a huge construction project, and anytime a city goes through a construction project this big that's going to span the course of years, the mayor obviously plays an integral role.
Now, Gilat, when do you think we can expect a decision to be made?
Yeah, this one's really tough, and it's something actually Chuck Schumer and Governor Cuomo and the people of Syracuse have been waiting on for years. There's no set date, but really it's the DOT who kind of, once they come to a decision, they're going to relay that message to the Federal Highway Transit Authority, and they're going to set that in stone. But something to look out for is that the DOT is currently waiting on the results of an independent study that discusses the environmental impact of this. So once they get the results from that study, they say they're going to move forward with the decision. So that study's definitely something to look out for.
Certainly going to be one of the most pressing issues moving forward. Thank you, Gilat. Consensus CNY has a plan to create a more efficient regional government by merging Syracuse's government with Onondaga County. But their current plan lacks definitive answers on some of the major problems the city is facing, namely education. What impact will the new administration have on this issue? Talking Points contributor Thomas St. Hilaire is here to break it down. Thomas, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So what does government consolidation mean, especially when it combine Syracuse and Onondaga?
Right, I mean, well, this is a proposed merger between the city of Syracuse and Onondaga County. First off, let's start with something that all the candidates pretty much agree on, or anyone agrees with, regardless of political affiliation, which this would make the city of Syracuse substantially larger. Right now, the city of Syracuse is about 25 square miles. This will put it in the hundreds. Population would also significantly increase, making it the 35th largest city in the country. That's larger than cities like St. Louis, than Tampa. So that's something that everybody can agree on. I think where you're starting to see some of the differences, though, between supporters of this are saying that this would save the government about $20 million annually. So it's this whole efficiency argument. But the opponents to this are saying that this will strip power away from a lot of Syracuse residents.
Now, Thomas, when we take a look at the front runners, Juanita Perez-Williams and Ben Walsh, what are their views on this topic?
Right. I mean, well, for starters, all the candidates have come out and posed this. But Perez has probably been the most vocal about this. And the thing that she's been really harping on is economically, this would put a lot of people in debt. You're also having the argument, again, that kind of alluded to earlier, which is that this takes power away from a lot of the people. And Walsh has echoed that as well. Now, Walsh favors some of the cost-reducing measures, but overall does not support combining these legislative bodies.
Now, moving beyond those cost-reducing measures, one thing that concerns me is the fact that Interstate CEO, who is the lead backer of the Consensus report, actually was one of the biggest donors to Ben Walsh's campaign. So even though he might be against it, and he has, courted the endorsement of these individuals, what can we expect on this this issue moving forward in both cases. In fact, in Juanita Perez-Williams' case as well.
Well, I think the first thing that's important to understand is why these candidates would oppose it. It's not just the argument that this would take power away from people. I mean, to put it in this way, if we were to say right now that we were to get rid of the United States House of Representatives, there would not be many members of the House of Representatives that would support that. So all these candidates who are running for mayor, they would have to run again in a year. They would essentially be like an interim mayor. So they would no longer have that 4-year term. So even if these candidates are receiving money from some of these organizations, the likelihood that they'll want to just give up their position of mayor is very unlikely.
Certainly an issue that we're going to be keeping an eye on. Thank you for your input, Thomas.
Hey, thank you very much.
And with the polls closed, both candidates are anxiously awaiting results. We have Talking Points reporter Sabrina Maggiore at the Perez-Williams watch party. Sabrina, what's the mood like over there?
Thanks, guys. So we're here at Juanita Perez-Williams campaign headquarters where everyone's gathered for the watch party. Behind me is the campaign podium where Perez-Williams is set to speak later tonight. And in front of me, everyone's gathered for the event. Very excited to be here. You can really sense the energy in this room. A lot of the people in the room are friends and families of Perez-Williams directly. There's a sign out there that says, "We are family."
Ask if I'm asking
and
the
it's very
question
telling
right
of
now.
one of the platforms that Perez-Williams campaigned on. She campaigned on the fact that she's the people's candidate. So it's really showing in this room with a lot of political energy.
Now, Sabrina, former Vice President Joe Biden endorsed Perez-Williams. Are they hoping that they can make up for her drop in the polls in the last couple of days?
Yeah, so Joe Biden recently endorsed Perez-Williams not long ago. He was one of the most recent endorsements following a series of other Democratic endorsements from Governor Andrew Cuomo,
Tell them I need the
Senator
numbers again
Kirsten
on Prop 1.
Gillibrand, and Senator Chuck Schumer, among the many. But Vice President Biden's is a big endorsement, particularly because he has roots in the Syracuse area. He was a Syracuse University College of Law student, so it's a big endorsement for Perez-Williams for sure.
Thank you, Sabrina. We have an update on the current poll numbers for Prop 1. Pretty much the entire city of New York City has voted no, and that's a report from the New York Times. And when we come back, a breakdown of the latest state of the race. Stay with us.
Come on, it's not that hard.
My big man fingers are having a problem with these little tiny buttons.
Whoa, watch it there. Your blood pressure's gonna go through the roof.
Tell me about it. I'm trying to learn how to get it down. Instead, it keeps going up.
High blood pressure can increase the risk for heart attack or stroke. Learn how to keep yours at a healthy range.
Ever hear a voice command? Just say text barbershop to 97779.
That's not what I said.
Just give me that. Now my blood pressure's up.
Well, Thomas, you've got prediabetes. But with more exercise and a change in diet, it can be reversed.
I've tried exercising. It just makes me hungry for bacon.
I love bacon, too. And who really likes to exercise?
Not me.
Me neither.
Nobody. So we're good?
What? Oh, you still have prediabetes. Big time.
Welcome back. Now, guys, I just quickly want to break down, our final thoughts on the race before we end tonight's show. I mean, we have the opportunity tonight to make history in Syracuse. You're either going to have the first Latina mayor or the first independent mayor. And, a lot of people today asked me, who do you think's going to win? I said, it is literally a flip of the coin. I could not tell you. It's so close.
Yeah, it's absolutely too close to call. We don't really have many numbers in to tell. But the big thing to look at is where the votes of Laura Levine and Howie Hawkins go. You're expecting Hawkins' votes to go to Perez-Williams. You're expecting Levine's votes to go to Walsh. And I think those extra votes from Levine may be what Walsh needs to push it over. We'll see how many of those votes he can steal away from her. I think if he gets a lot, he'll get the win.
Gilat?
Yeah, I think the big thing is going to be momentum. I think Ben Walsh has the momentum right now, and a lot of times in tight races like this, I think it's not who has been more hot in the entire race. I think it's who's the hottest recently. His poll numbers jumped 8 points within the last month, and he rose in categories such as Democrats and African Americans. Even though Perez-Williams has the more votes with African Americans and Democrats, he's on the rise there as opposed to staying stagnant, and I think that'll push him over the edge.
And one more thing to watch for is the Nicoletti voters. How much will the people vote for Nicoletti tonight? The last poll had him at 6%, and he dropped out. So let's see if, you know, that can take away from Juanita Perez-Williams.
It'll be interesting to see how the votes are clustered and where the majority are coming from each area of the city as we see, you know, this race kind of expanding and all-consuming. Ben Walsh and Juanita Perez-Williams in a dead heat. That's all the time we have for tonight's election coverage. Thanks so much for joining us.
If you want to stay updated with the latest results of the mayoral race, follow Citrus TV News on Twitter and check out our website at citrustv.com. I'm Mike Riccardi.
And I'm Josh Carney. Don't forget to tune in to a new edition of Talking Points next Monday at 7:30. Good night.